I want to be closer with him. I want a better relationship with him. And so that's kind of the heart, that we're coming at this. And so, man, I'd love to hear, like, could you give us like a taste or an idea, or like, can you point us in the right direction of like what solid food, what Broma might look or sound like on this channel? Throw me a little
meat. So
Mangia.
So ethnically, both Dan and I we got a little Italian in us. So we're a little Mangia. We want to feed you a little bit. And so
a little bit.
So basically we're each going to provide you with a little bit of meat, nothing too crazy. Hopefully you whet your palate. I've done a deep study on Genesis, like really deep, probably about 25 chapters. I'm just going to pull something from that. And so, and I know Dan has something good as well. So let's just real quick, let's just go to Genesis 4, 3 through 5. And it says, "So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions." So I just want to highlight fruit and fat. "And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering, but for Cain and for his offering, he had no regard. So Cain became very angry and his countenance fell." So again, I already did it, but I want you guys to, it's noteworthy, the difference in the type of sacrifices. So there's fruits of the soil, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm learning this now out in the Ozarks. They are renewable. They are bloodless, right? So I get my fruit, it's gonna grow again, right? The seeds are gonna fall on the ground. It's gonna grow again. Mm-hmm. They're renewable and they're bloodless, right? And we know about the blood, right? So they're bloodless. But what Abel did, the fat portions, fat portions are set apart for the Lord. And I just want to quote Leviticus 3. It says, 16, "The priest shall offer them up in smoke on the altar as food, an offering by fire, for the soothing aroma. All fat is the Lord's." And so, I don't know how deep we want to get here, but basically, and we'll talk about this, but I think it's amazing that the fat is for the Father. The fat is for the Lord. And so I think Abel knew that. I think, he knew about that. Adam was a priest. He's trying to do this, and he gave the first of his flock and of their fat portions. And so, and also I want to point out that, I talked about the fruit and the soil, and it's renewable and it's bloodless, right? The Abel gave the firstborn. And so that's amazing, because this points to like an act of faith, right? Because you have one child, you're not promised another one. So basically, he's not guaranteed that there will be more. And so it's just amazing that Abel gave the first of his flock, gave it to God as an offering, without knowing that he would be blessed with way more. And so that's just a true point act of faith right there.
That's right.
And so, also, if you know the story, Adam was kicked out of the garden, Adam and Eve, and they were cursed. There was a cursed ground there. So, Cain was dealing with that cursed ground, where Abel was dealing with living and breathing animals. And I just wanted to, kind of look at that two separate kind of things there. And so, as a tiller of the ground, right? So Adam was a tiller of the ground, Cain was a tiller of the ground. So I just want to read some little quick facts that I thought were interesting about that. So farmers, they generally end up living in permanent dwellings, so such as a house. So if you read on, Cain actually left after he unfortunately murdered Abel. He was kicked out, and he built a city and a home. And so these farmers have houses. They have permanent dwellings. So while it is true that also Adam and Eve tended the garden, Cain was now tilling cursed ground outside the garden. So a little bit different, right? So it was Adam's sin that cursed it. Lord willing, we go back in the kingdom, we're going to have amazing ground. Like the fruit is just going to grow like every second, right? But Cain was tilling cursed ground. And then finally, on this tiller of the ground part, the farmer is a slave to his field. So faith in the Father and in the superiority of man was first lost among the agricultural nations. It was there that idol worship developed. And so when you research all these, they were a slave to their field. They were all focused on the farming aspect. Where agricultural nation, or where with sheep, you're basically, you don't know where food's coming from for your animals. You have to have that faith and trust. And so now I want to talk about keepers of the sheep. So they wander with their flocks, and they generally live in tents. Yeshua lived in a tent, right? Jesus, he did not have an earthly home, he said. Paul did the same. He built tents. And so I just see this comparison between tiller of the ground and keeper of sheep. So, and it's interesting. We've talked about Babylon earlier. Genesis 46:34 says, "For every shepherd is an abomination to Egypt." An abomination to Egypt. So shepherds weren't welcome there. They loved their tillers of the ground. They loved their produce, but a shepherd was not welcome there. And so, and finally, Egyptian culture was based on agriculture, like I just said. But the whole lineage of Israel, the forefathers were shepherds. Jacob was a dweller in tents. Esau was a man of the field. Jacob's sons were shepherds. Moses kept the flock. David tended to his father's flock. Proverbs speaks in favor of shepherding. And Amos was the herdsman. And so obviously we have the great shepherd, right? The great shepherd that came in Jesus. And so I just wanted to kind of show the similarities between the tiller of the ground, the keeper of sheep. And so this is the last thing I have right here, and then I'll hand it back off to Dan here. But so, being a keeper of sheep made me think of Adam. And I already kind of mentioned that we have a new shepherd here. So Adam was a keeper, was a tiller of the ground, but we have a second Adam. Paul says that we have a second Adam that comes, and that's Jesus or Yeshua. And there were so many parallels. And I shared it with Dan a few months ago, and he loved it. And I just would like to share that again. So again, I'm just comparing Adam and Jesus. And so the first Adam sinned, right? He sinned in the garden. Jesus committed no sin. And so the first Adam, separated us from God, right? So we were kicked out because of that sin. And so Jesus, his righteousness will bring us back into the garden to be able to live with him forever. Amazing. Death came through the first Adam, right? Nobody will live to be 120, right? That was one of the things, we have to be born again, right? And so the second Adam, Jesus, became a resurrection. He's the key to eternal life. First Adam toiled, sweat, and ate from the ground, Genesis 2:17. But Jesus, he became manna and bread of life. And we already talked about that, the spiritual bread, not the literal, that spiritual bread that we will not hunger or thirst no more. A few more, the first Adam sought to become like God, Genesis 3:5. Might tie in with Dan's Freemasonry thing. And the last Adam was a God or Elohim. He became like man. He became
God in the flesh.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And so that's amazing. And then a few more. First Adam tasted death from a tree. Last Adam tasted death on a tree. Wow. First Adam blamed his bride. He blamed Eve. Last Adam took the blame for his bride.
Wow.
The first Adam brought thorns and thistles. The last Adam wore thorns and thistles. He had it on his head.
That'll preach.
And then finally, the first Adam listened to what the serpent said, take and eat. And Jesus said to his followers, take and eat, Matthew 26:26.